a few years ago, I got Mitt Romney to come and speak to some of my leaders here, and he asked me before, like, what should I speak on? I was like, give him like the 6 most important things to be successful in life and in business, like very high level, like, you know. And one thing that he said that was interesting, he said that you have to get lucky. And I remember thinking, like, I don't believe in luck, or you know. But what he talked about was that the years that he made the most of his wealth, you know, the average return on the S&P 500 or the Dow or something like that, it was some absurd number, like 3,000% increase in value of these companies. And he said that you would have had to have been dumb to not make a lot of money.
Welcome to the Charlie Liddle Business Podcast, and we're so happy to have Connor Ruggio, CEO of Aptive Solar, and Tanner Williams, who's my team leader, good friend, father of Mac, who's 2, and he likes the rooms.
He does. He loves the rooms.
So thanks for taking the time. These guys are legends, and I look up to them a lot. I've been able to work with them as I sold pest control in 2020, and now solar this last summer, and solar going forward. And so. I think you guys are really hard workers. I love the culture at Aptive, and that's one of the big reasons I love working here and sticking with it. And so maybe we start with Connor. Like, what was kind of your career path? You served a mission in the Dominican Republic. I served in Puerto Rico.
Oh,
so cool. Al lado. What got you into sales, and how did you go from sales to Altera to Aptive Solar?
Yeah, it's been a long time. I think. I don't know, 12 or 13 years or something like that I've been in the industry. So after my mission, you know, like a lot of people, I got home and didn't have any money and was trying to find a way to pay for school and kind of knock off a lot of those big items that you think of life, you know, marriage and eventually having kids. And I think something that dawned on me pretty early when I started reading books was that many people go through college not really worrying about their financial future. And I started to think about that, you know, more immediately to maybe harness the power of compound interest and so on and so forth. So started with a small pest control company. The criteria of choosing that company probably wasn't the best. It's called White Knight. The owner, Chip White's a great guy, still a friend. I mostly chose it because he was like just a really good person. And, you know, that isn't always necessarily the best way to choose like your business opportunities, but I was looking for something I think to kind of replace my mission in a sense. So worked there for a few years, had a great experience and couldn't complain. I was making good money as I went through BYU. And then as I approached graduation, I was kind of at a crossroads, didn't know what I wanted to do. And I went and I took the LSAT and was like, basically, I'm just going to see how I do. And if I do good, I'll go to law school. And so I did well. And then I took the GMAT and did well, and then I decided to do an MBA. And so, anyways,
basically you took the LSAT, and it sounds like you wanted to go down that path. But from what I understand, it sounds like you did.
Yeah, I was more interested in business for sure, but I thought that a JD MBA might be a powerful degree, and I think that I had the beginnings of thinking like an entrepreneur, but was still a little bit caught up in maybe the conventional path of how you're supposed to be successful or what society would deem to be a good career. Anyway, so around that time, I also read a really influential book for me, which was Good to Great. And then
Jim Collins.
Yeah, Jim Collins, and Built to Last. And in the book, he talked about how, albeit at this time I was still working for that other company, and he talked about how there were typically 1 or 2 companies in an industry that were like revolutionary, and talked about all the attributes that contribute to that. Yeah. And I remember asking myself, you know, in this industry, in the door-to-door space, like, who is that? And I remember that at that time, Altera had posted this billboard right on University Parkway. I'd drive by it all the time. And it said 52,000 accounts. And I remember just telling myself, like, that's got to be a lie. And it kind of like ate at me. But eventually it drove me to come in and meet with Dave Royce, who is the founder of the company. And I was really impressed. And so I kind of thought about that for about a year, and I read this book, and it made me start to think that, hey, I have one more summer before I go to law school. Why don't I go work somewhere that I can maybe learn some of these habits and these attributes that Jim Collins talks about? And so that was the start of Altera. That was back in, I think, 2014. It's been a minute. And just had a way better experience than I even expected. Went to law school the next year. Really enjoyed law school a lot. But I came to the realization I didn't want to be an attorney. That was I think the outcome for me. I looked at the income, the lifestyle, the happiness. A lot of the attorneys that I met aren't particularly happy people. And and a lot of them recommended that I don't go into law. And so after that year,
That's what all the lawyers say when you ask them about how to become a lawyer. They said, just don't.
No, literally. Yeah, I mean, literally. And, when I would meet attorneys, and it just seemed like they didn't truly enjoy what they did most of the time. And so although I loved everything that I learned, I knew that wasn't going to be like a career path for me. And meanwhile, I had found something with Altera that was, pretty remarkable in terms of it was a great income opportunity. I was able to help a lot of people. It had, virtually limitless growth opportunity. And I thought, why go to something like a legal career that, frankly, the only reason to do it is what everybody else thinks about it. And so I made the decision at that point to kind of burn my ships and go all in on this industry and building Altera. We sold that company, started Aptive with more like a long-term vision of, how are we going to build this into one of the biggest and the best pest control company in the world. From there I had the pleasure to just build a big region and became the fastest growing regional in the company, and eventually became the president of sales. So that is kind of the whole path, I suppose, with Altera and Aptive. As president of sales, I enjoyed that. I got a chance to sit on our executive team and kind of apply a lot of the stuff I learned in my MBA to, more of like a high level big business. But truthfully, I really wanted the opportunity at that point. I was like, look, I've kind of dominated in this area of sales and leadership and growth, and I got an MBA to learn how to like run a business. And so now it's time to take that step. And so about 2 years ago, a little less than 2 years ago, I approached Dave and Bess, the founders of Aptive, and we all agreed to partner and start up Aptive Solar. And then went and got Tanner and a few other people to help us start it. And here we are today.
So I've got to say, today I had lunch at Panda Express, and every time you go to Panda Express, they have a fortune cookie. And so today, my fortune cookie said, "You will be given new confidence by an old mentor." I was like, you know what? I'm about to interview Connor and Tanner, but I didn't think you were that old, so I'm not sure if that's necessarily. How old are you, by the way?
34.
So pretty young and pretty successful for having just been doing it for a decade or just over a decade.
Yeah.
And then Tanner, 27.
Yeah.
So slightly younger. So Tanner, thanks for coming. Good friend. Tanner married my cousin's girlfriend, and he went on a mission. I tell that to everyone who asks who Tanner is, and I think it's kind of funny.
That's true.
You served in Peru. You went to BYU as well.
Yeah.
Why did you do sales, and why are you still doing it?
Pretty similar to Connor, to where I had money was on my mind and my financial future was on my mind while I was in college. I was that poor college kid that just got back from his mission, had no money, and so I was going to go work at a sod farm, and the next best opportunity was selling pest control in Chicago with my old roommate, who was also my best friend. So I trusted him, and he was making good money, and we still work together today.
And were you 20 when you did this?
22. Yeah, I went on my mission a little late. I went on my mission when I was 20. So
okay, so you ended up doing it when you got back.
Yeah, right when I got back. Yep. Literally, I'd been home for like 3 weeks. So went out to Chicago, sold some pest control, and I was like, sweet, that was better than working on a sod farm where I have bad allergies anyway. So I was like, that was going to be a miserable experience. And I really loved sales, and I did pretty well at it. I was on track to be one of the top rookies at that company at the time. And so I felt very confident, and like I had this newfound confidence where, I was like, okay, cool. My worst case scenario this next year is I can go and knock doors and sell some bug spray and make pretty good money. So.
And you did.
And I did. So that kind of was what started it. And then I wanted to be, I wanted to go to grad school, things like that, but I wanted to be like a doctor or a dentist. Yeah. And I think the reason I wanted to be a doctor or dentist for so long was because I saw people who were doctors and dentists succeeding financially. Mm-hmm. And so my idea, same thing, it was a great dinner table job. Like, oh yeah, I'm a doctor.
The prestige.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. But I really didn't want to do it for any other reason besides that. The doctor, I guess, profession appealed more to me because of the ability to help more people, I think, than maybe the dentist. I saw it more of like, oh, people don't want to go to the dentist, they have to go to the dentist, but
Right.
it also didn't have calculus, so I didn't have to do that. So anyway, really my motives were all about trying to get into a good job, right? That people would deem as a good job. And then when I went into sales and I actually like really dedicated myself to it, I kind of had this epiphany where all of a sudden I was like, you actually don't have to be a doctor to make really good money. Like you can actually do other things and maybe enjoy life more. I kind of stuck with that whole dental career for a little bit, wanting to do that. I was like ready to take the DAT and all those things. And I realized like, I actually just don't love teeth and I don't love this job, but I am having a really good time in the job that I'm in right now, which is at the time pest control. I wasn't Connor. I didn't have a region or anything like that. I had like one team that I led, but I was able to taste like what it's like to help people, little college kids like myself, make really, really big kid money in a 4-month period. And I was like, this is pretty cool. So,
Well, to be fair though, in the beginning years, kind of in that same time frame, I didn't have a region either, and so I started with Altera Aptive. I think 25 or 26 years old. So kind of the same time frame when you're starting with Aptive Solar.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, Tanner's about to be a Connor Ruggio in the next decade.
for sure. No, absolutely. And it just, the first couple of years in the industry, it takes time to learn the craft and to understand, management principles and how to lead people correctly. So, yeah.
Cool. So one thing I think is interesting is you look at like the super successful people, like a lot of the billionaires. If the statistic is right, I don't know where it comes from, but it's like 2/3 of billionaires start out in sales. And you can see that kind of across the industries. And so maybe Connor, you could start off, but what do you guys think? Like what is it about sales? What do you learn from it? Why is it important? Why if you're not going to do pest control solar for more than 3 years, would you do it?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I don't know if the statistic is real, but it wouldn't surprise me at all. I think every entrepreneur possesses a lot of the same attributes of great salespeople. The first thing that comes to mind is risk aversion. I think that most people in the world are highly risk averse. They're afraid to take chances. They don't have a ton of confidence in themselves. And to be an entrepreneur or a good salesperson, you have to be willing to take risks, and you have to have confidence that you're going to be able to succeed. And although many people don't want to acknowledge it, that is what holds them back from starting a business, pursuing their dreams, is that they're risk averse and they're afraid. And
so a big part of that is that you're paid what you're worth. It's 100% commission, and that's kind of the scary thing.
Yeah, 100%. And not every salesperson makes a good entrepreneur, because there are other elements of, organizational and other types of things that make for a good entrepreneur. But I think back to a good friend of mine that I had growing up. He was the younger brother of a girl that I dated, and this kid was wild. Like, you want somebody to go send like a backflip off a massive cliff, like he'll do it immediately. And I knew that he would be good at sales because he possesses like no fear.
Right.
And sure enough, was an amazing salesperson, and probably wouldn't have been a great entrepreneur necessarily, but I think it's that willingness to take risks that's probably the biggest separator.
What do you think, Tanner?
well, like I look at Carter, for example, and Carter had like the most confidence I've ever met. Like he had
A
this,
little
like,
too much.
A little too much confidence.
Shout out
he
Carter
had-
Nelson.
Yeah, shout out to Carter Nelson. And so like you kind of can see that the amount of confidence that you have to have is almost like you almost have to have this level of like you're too confident, right? But yeah, confidence obviously leads to being able to take more risks because you're so confident like you're going to still do it. And I wouldn't be surprised because like you said, not every salesperson makes a good entrepreneur, but I'm pretty sure every entrepreneur is going to be a good salesperson every single time.
Generally,
I
yeah.
don't really know if too many that wouldn't be.
It's like
Like
water
good
is life, but like sales is life for a business kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the other things that come to mind, I think the principle, I call it the law of the harvest, but the willingness to put up work in the very beginning without any guarantee of result.
Yeah.
That's something that you have to do in sales. You have to get through a learning curve.
It takes patience.
Yeah, you got to learn your pitch. There's all these things you have to learn. You learn your product. Same thing with starting a business. There's really no assurances. You put in a tremendous amount of work in the beginning with the vision and the goal. And so I think that generally what salespeople and entrepreneurs have in common is that they tend to be far more visionary and willing to take those risks, and they have the foresight to see, the seeds that will eventually sprout. and to do the work necessary for that to happen.
Well, so many people are like addicted to instant gratification, right? It's like their face is buried in their phone all day because they get those little endorphins. And in sales, especially like in solar, I've seen it more so than ever. You have to have some long-term vision. You have to have some patience and like do the things that are maybe boring or repetitive and that don't yield an instant result. And that's hard for people, especially like nowadays. And we see that all the time, kids that don't make it in the summer sales or whatever it may be, because they're not willing to like just stick it out for a little bit. And yeah, I haven't started a business or anything, but we've been really big inside of Aptive Solar getting off, and we had to have some patience, I would say, to make it through that period of time. And most people just aren't willing to do that. And so I think that was a good comment there.
Cool. One thing I think is really good about what you guys have done in your career is you're self-aware. So there's like, okay, MBA, lawyer, maybe dentist, doctor, and that probably works out for some people. Like we've had attorneys on the podcast, and some people are really good at being a dentist, but
no judgment to any of the attorneys. Just wasn't for me.
The other thing is I think solar is really interesting in 2022 right now. I served in Puerto Rico, at Bodie Gardner and Alex Dunn. So they're the heads of Vivint or were. But I served in their ward over there.
Awesome.
So I got to know them.
What's that neighborhood called?
Dorado.
Dorado. Yeah,
super expensive.
That makes sense.
I was there one time. Bodie's like, Connor called me. I'm like, oh, cool. But so what Bodie told me about sales was that you should do solar, which I thought was really interesting because he's coming from Vivint, which is mostly alarms.
Yeah.
But he could tell in the market, this makes sense right now.
Yeah.
The Inflation Reduction Act, the Green Deal or whatever it's called, just happened, and maybe we're not all a fan of it, but with solar, it helps the market. So why solar?
Well, I mean,
why not solar?
Yeah, really, I mean, that is the question, why not solar? But a few years ago, I got Mitt Romney to come and speak to some of my leaders here, and he asked me before, like, what should I speak on? I was like, give him like the 6 most important things to be successful in life and in business, like very high level, like, And one thing that he said that was interesting, he said that you have to get lucky. And I remember thinking, like, I don't believe in luck or, But what he talked about was that the years that he made the most of his wealth, the average return on the S&P 500 or the Dow or something like that, it was some absurd number, like 3,000% increase in value of these companies. And he said that you would have had to have been dumb to not make a lot of money. And there is truth to that being in the right time in the right place can definitely aid you. There's an old saying, a high tide rises all ships. And so for me, I think part of the impetus to starting this business, I had gotten the MBA. I knew that I wanted to, build something at some point, but I was practical and, taking the steps to prepare myself to do it. But when I looked around, I thought, man, the technology is getting better. Utility rates continue to go up, which is kind of the alternative choice for a homeowner. The election occurred, and I thought, I have a feeling that Biden is going to be much more pro-energy than any Republican counterpart. Not that Trump was actually great for solar as well, but Biden's better. And yeah, there are so many forces that are kind of acting in favor of the industry as a whole. And I think if you're a person that's wanting to spend a few more years in sales, it's tough to argue that there are many better financial opportunities. And the recent Inflation Reduction Act just provides complete continuity to the industry for the next 10 years and instability, which is, great for us and great for anyone that's trying to start their career in that.
Awesome. And just to jump in. And Connor's been, just a legend at recruiting and growing Aptive and now Aptive Solar. Tanner's done great too. Obviously now we're really good at selling solar this last year and a half. And so, as you comment about solar, what are some things that you've done to be a successful salesman in that market?
Yeah. Well, I had one thought about why solar. I'm really geeking out on this Alex Hormozi guy right now.
Yeah.
As everybody is, but he talks about there's like 2 ways to become a millionaire, and they're not the only 2 ways, obviously. But he's like, you can start a business and grow it and expand it and sell it, whatever else, or you can sell. He's like, and I know more millionaires who are salespeople than I know millionaires who are CEOs or entrepreneurs, because most CEOs, entrepreneurs actually fail. He's like, and if you want to be a millionaire in sales, you just need to sell more expensive things. He's like, you need to get good at sales and then sell high ticket items. And I think solar is one of those high ticket items that you can sell a massive volume of
Right.
and make stupid money.
You can sell jets, but you're probably not going to sell as many jets
Right.
as solar systems.
But you can go sell 6 solar systems in one day, and like that is insane, right? The amount of money that you make on that. So anyway, that's why I look at sales as like I'm going to help a customer or a homeowner get put into a better situation financially. I'm going to help the environment. I'm going to help myself get a better financial situation. It's just a win-win for like everybody, and that's pretty rare. So I think solar right now is still in that space, and even with things like the 30% tax credit for the next 10 years, like that will be cool, but that will eventually become almost like not even a big part of solar because it's been around for so long that solars are going to continue to get regulated or whatever else. But I think overall, right now is the perfect time because everybody wins when you go solar. So, but in becoming a good salesperson, I think with solar, for me, I think it's just a logical breakdown of here are the benefits and here are the potential cons. And there just really aren't very many cons. Like it's hard to suck at solar unless you just don't believe in it. And if you believe in it, like it's hard not to be successful in it as long as you put in the work. So I look at it like for the next 10 years, if solar's gonna be around for only 10 years, how much of that pie can I earn? Mm-hmm. And that motivates me. I'm super hungry to grab as much as I want, as much as I can. And I've taken my training more serious. Like I'm always looking to improve. Whereas in pest control, I got very complacent. I was like, yeah, I can sell 400 a year. Like that's great. I want to break every record because I don't know. For me, like the amount of money I can capture from that is huge, obviously. So
I'll make a note on like how Tanner took a leap in his career because I've watched his career for the last 5 years or whatever it's been. The last 18 months, Tanner really started to invest into himself as if you were investing into a business and saying that I'm going to take everything about myself and kind of treat that like it's my business. And so he went out and got as much coaching and mentorship and, obviously put in a ton of hard work, along the way. But went into other things, went into Ironmans and things like that to stabilize his mind and I was saying fortalecer, that's a Spanish word, but fortalize.
Strengthen.
To strengthen his mindset. And so, I think that once again, that's more how an entrepreneur tends to think. And that's why highly successful salespeople are very entrepreneurial is they realize that they themselves are their business. And so.
Cool. That's something that you want to talk about.
Yeah. So, so Tanner brought up the concept of, what was the guy's name that you said?
Alex Ramosi.
I don't even know who that is, but
he's a whippersnapper in the English.
I am not the most connected in social media admittedly, but for me, that process that you were talking about of how do you become a millionaire, that was definitely kind of how I thought about things. My goal initially through the industry was to make enough money that I would be stable for the rest of my life. And the truth is the first couple $1 million that you make, that money really actually matters. That money invested and used correctly can make the rest of your life look radically different. But after that point, every $1 million increasingly, or rather decreasingly, becomes less and less and less of value.
Basically diminishing returns.
The value, yep, exactly. From an economics term, there's just a diminishing return on that money in terms of if you think of it as utility or value to yourself, money becomes less and less important. And for me, the risk, because people have asked me all the time, like, why didn't I go start my business, when I was in my 20s, when I was earlier? And I say it's because I had a very clear, lower risk path that I knew for sure would get me to become a multimillionaire through this industry. And to me, like the equation of the risk to take on versus the outcome difference didn't make any sense. Now, going back a few years ago, I'd already made millions of dollars. I was in a very different position. And at that point, starting a business, wasn't as big of a deal. But the truth is that this industry and being a salesperson and a recruiter and leading a sales program, that's what made me the millions that really actually probably mattered in the long run. Everything else on top of that is kind of just gravy. And you have more latitude to take some more risks and to maybe fail as an entrepreneur. But that first couple $1 million, I couldn't afford to fail at. Like I had to make sure that was taken advantage of. So anyways, hopefully that makes sense. But I love that
Yeah.
whoever that guy is, I'm going to look him up now.
Yeah.
You'll find a lot.
Carter's dad, Tyler Nelson, my uncle, told me that you can either work really hard in your 20s and basically have an easy life the rest of your life, or just kind of play around in your 20s and you have a hard life the rest of your life.
Yep.
Kind of what you're talking about. Albert Einstein said, eighth wonder of the world is compound interest, which is what those first few millions is.
Yep.
Yeah. So, and I know you guys are busy. Tanner's about to jump on a call. So real quick, Tanner, what advice do you have for the 20-year-olds out there who are thinking about their future and how to be successful?
Well, you just nailed it on the head. I remember in one of those, I showed you guys the conference room downstairs in that tour that we did, and I told them, I was like, this conference room is probably where I got like the majority of like all my nuggets growing through sales at Aptive, and like where I remember like I transformed in that room. But anyway, it's a different topic. One thing that Connor said in there one time that really stuck with me is we all have the same size mountain, and this mountain it looks undaunting, like it looks like almost unsurmountable, but we can either chip away at it right now and like get a huge portion of that chipped away in the beginning, or we can chip away at it throughout our entire life into our 60s, 70s, 80s. I would rather just get it out of the way. And that has been something that stuck with me. So whatever you're doing in your 20s, don't wait until your 30s and 40s to start chipping away at that mountain. Like chip away at it today. That's the end of that Alex Morgan guy says all the time. Like I want to be, in my 20s, I want to be a millionaire. And when I was a millionaire, I want to be in my 20s. So it's like we get so lost trying to figure out what we're going to do and whatever else. Like just start doing something. Just start bettering yourself. Making those investments into yourself. Join a sales org, because those are going to help you out a lot. Those skills that you'll attain. And just become like a really, really, really solid version of yourself in your 20s, so that the rest of your life is easier. And I'm still in my 20s, so I still got a lot to do, but it's been awesome to see like just a little bit of return that I've already seen on that.
Along the way, with what he's describing, there's going to be a lot of people who don't see it. It could be your parents. I know that people in my family didn't see it. They don't understand why you don't make the family reunion. They don't understand like why you grind like the way that you do. But the truth is that most people are mediocre, even your family members oftentimes. And if you want to live a mediocre life, then you have to think and act the same way everyone else does. But for what it's worth, for anyone that's watching this, I embrace that philosophy. I taught that philosophy for many years and still do. And I have no regrets about it. I worked really hard and made a lot of sacrifices in my 20s, and I live a pretty awesome life now. Not that
I agree.
I'm not trying to brag or anything, but I'm really happy with how my life has turned out, and I think that my wife, she feels the same way, certainly. And ultimately, what you gain from working hard in your 20s, if you do it correctly, is freedom. You can spend the rest of your life doing whatever you want to do. And that is a luxury that very, very few people have. So
cool. Thanks, Connor. Tanner has to jump. Thanks for coming out.
Yes, sir. Thanks for having us.
I've got one more question for Connor though, before you. I know you're busy, but yeah. Thank you.
I can listen to this.
Okay. So Tanner just said a minute ago that the biggest thing was he invested in himself, and you pointed out too, Connor, you're a super avid reader. Mm-hmm. In building the company and just from investing in yourself, what are some of the biggest reasons why you should read and learn?
Great question. So, a little bit about my background. I didn't have a great family life, and very grateful to my grandparents who ended up raising me, but I think I missed out on a lot of the mentorship that at least I hope that my kids benefit from me. And I realized that, so when I got onto my mission president became a great mentor for me. And then I got home and there was this huge vacancy, just this big vacancy of mentorship and direction. And I started to kind of look around in the world and figure out like, well, who's going to be my mentor? And eventually what I realized is that these incredible people have written books that normally is kind of a compendium of everything that they felt was important in their life. And they just leave it there for you to read. It's almost like interviewing them. And so, for example, Mitt Romney, I wanted him to become like a mentor of mine. And so before I got to know him, I read and learned a lot about his life and would kind of try to learn from that and kind of mentor myself via that information. Because
it's essentially free. It's out there.
It is. It comes with a price of time, I suppose. But yeah, I think there are just some incredible books that are out there that, and I'll say this, I think a lot of people try to read a lot of different books. I normally will read a handful of new books every year, but I've kind of gotten to the point where I have about a dozen books that I really, really like, and those are the books that I, principally focus on. That, the old saying.
You read them like scriptures, basically. You read them over
Yeah.
and over again.
Yeah, I mean, my other than the real scriptures, like David Goggins. That's my. I've read his book 30 times in a 2 year, maybe 3 year stretch. But part of being well read is becoming like very intimately acquainted with the author. It's not necessarily reading 1,000 different books. In fact, I kind of stopped reading a lot of new books because I realized that a lot of the times they weren't very good, and I'd rather spend my time rereading something that I've forgotten. That I knew is of really high value. So
I would go on that because I think a lot of people are like obsessed with this notion that like, oh, I need to read 52 books a year, right? That's like a big goal that a lot of people have.
Yeah.
And I've never read 52 books in a year, so I can't dog it. What I can say though is I have got more from like honing in on like one or two authors and emulate, like trying like that I want to emulate and trying to like learn how they act. Like so right now I'm all up in this Alex Hormoz. I listen to his podcast probably 3 to 5 times a day. Read his book. Like I absorb his content on YouTube. Like I'm really learning how he operates because I want to be like him. Or like Ed Mylett is a big one for me right now as well. That I've really honed in on Ed Mylett's content. But I found the same way that like you almost get scatterbrained. For me at least, when I'm reading multiple different books, because like they all have a similar. Like Carter says, you can sum it all up in a 5-minute TED Talk, but they all have a similar direction anyway. So I find like a few that I really have honed in on, and I found that to be more, I guess for me at least, it's been helpful rather than trying to consume all this content. That some of it's okay and some of it's not. Right? A lot of times people do like book reviews and like, I give this one like a 3 out of 5 stars. So I'm like, well, why'd you read it?
Right.
But,
Yeah, Bodie Gardner says you spell rich Time, right? So that's kind of what you guys are talking about. And then one last question for Connor. Just looking back on your career, what's the biggest thing you learned from sales, from building the company, building Aptive Solar? And then also just what advice do you have for your 20-year-old self or whoever's listening?
one overarching lesson. The only word that comes to my mind is just sacrifice. That to have what you want in life, you have to be willing to pay a price. And that price oftentimes, comes in different forms. Time is kind of the most common one that you're going to have to put in time. But I think that probably the biggest lesson that I've learned is that the power of a focused mind is like indomitable. And that I think for me is what this industry taught me, was that I was capable of doing far greater things than what I had ever envisioned, in my 20s. And I think I saw shades of it on my mission, but didn't fully comprehend it. But this industry and my career has taught me that through sacrifice and singular focus of mind, almost nothing is impossible. And it's a great way to live your life, to realize that you could actually do anything if you really wanted it and you're willing to pay the price, to do anything. Now, what advice would I give myself when I was 20? I would say, we were talking about reading books, and I think that starting to get deeper into that sooner and influencing myself through, those, or allowing myself to absorb those influences sooner, and becoming kind of obsessed with that. That's the advice I would have given myself. It took me a few years to kind of catch on to that. And once it did, my career and my life really took a lot of steps forward. So
awesome. Thank you so much. As far as some takeaways I see here, invest in time, invest in yourself, just be smart about it, and kind of keep the long term in mind with that vision.
Don't be risk averse.
Don't be
willing to make the jump.
Yeah. And so thanks for doing that. Do you guys have any openings? If people want to work with us, can they do that?
Yeah. We're hiring, a lot of different corporate positions. We're, building a huge sales force. I think that, depending on what that person's ambitions and goals are, one or the other might make sense. I will say that door-to-door sales doesn't tend to have high standards, but we want to be different in that regard and to be very selective about who we hire. But people with the right mindset, it's not about experience, it's more about mindset and attitude, in my opinion. So,
cool. So Connor and Tanner, how can people get a hold of you guys?
I am on Instagram. I can give out my phone number, whatever they want to do. They can obviously link up with you and then link up with me. We talk pretty frequently, so.
Okay,
Yeah,
awesome.
Easy to get hold of. Yeah, I'd say through you or hit me up on Instagram.
Okay, awesome. Instagram, Connor Ruggio, Tanner Williams, Charlie Liddle. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks.